Miguel had lost count of how many times he'd taken that path, elevator, hallway, room 407. But that morning, everything felt heavier. The hospital's silence was denser, like a fog pressing against his chest. His footsteps echoed like hammers on the tile. In his hand, her favorite sweater, worn but still carrying the scent she used to wear. He stood still at the door for a moment, took a deep breath, and went in. The room was cold, too bright. The beeping monitors filled the air with a sterile rhythm. Helena barely moved. Her lips were dry, her face pale, her delicate fingers resting motionless on the bedsheet. Miguel pulled up a chair and sat beside her. He didn't speak at first, just sat there in silence, as if trying to hold on to what was slipping away. Then, almost in a whisper, like someone speaking to a world that might vanish any second, he said, "I know you're tired, and maybe you can't hear me anymore, but I'm here. I'm trying to be strong, but it's hard. If it's time to go, I'll understand. Just forgive me if I wasn't everything you needed." He gently touched her fingers with his own and stayed there. He didn't beg, didn't shout. He just let time pass, his soul quietly pouring out through his eyes. After a while, he stood up, leaned down and kissed her forehead, then walked out of the room like a soldier leaving the battlefield, carrying inside him a bitter mix of love, sorrow, and helplessness. But outside, something unexpected was already waiting for him. Miguel didn't know where to go. He just started walking. The streets all looked the same. Cars passed, people moved on, and inside him everything was suspended. It felt like his soul was still sitting in that chair by her bedside. He was alive, but only by inertia. The wind brushed his face, but it didn't bring relief, just memories. His eyes didn't land anywhere. It was as if he were searching for something he couldn't name. He stopped at the curb in front of the hospital, leaned against a post, and stood there, motionless. His mind tried to accept what his body refused to feel. Was this the end? After all the laughter in the kitchen, the children growing up on the porch, those long drives just to watch the ocean, did it all really end here? In a white room with no voice, no real goodbye? He wanted to scream, to break something, but the silence inside him was louder than any impulse. It was the kind of pain that doesn't make a sound. It just lives there, taking up space. And then, in that fragile moment, breathing like someone learning to exist again, he saw her across the street. A woman was pushing a wheelchair, and in it, a little girl. The child clutched a doll tightly but smiled, beaming. Her head was shaved like someone fighting a battle bigger than herself. She looked at Miguel and waved, just like that, as if to say, "Hey, life is still here." And in that second, something flickered inside Miguel, a soft warmth, small, almost nothing, but just enough to make him breathe deeper. He stood still, watching. The little girl looked right at him, as if she knew him. A second passed, maybe two, and then she smiled, a full, honest smile that asked for nothing. Miguel looked away, flustered, but when he looked back, she was still there, waving, like she could feel exactly what he was going through. He tried to walk away, but he couldn't get her out of his mind. The next day, he returned, and the next, always at the same time, until one afternoon, he saw her again, sitting on a bench next to her mother, playing with a stuffed bear, missing a leg. Miguel gathered the courage to approach. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sofia," she replied, her voice soft but steady. She was 9. Aggressive leukemia. The doctors weren't hopeful. But next to her, Miguel felt something unfamiliar. Peace, like being near someone who could see beyond pain. From then on, he began visiting her. He brought coloring books, apple slices, stories from his childhood, and she smiled. She talked about God like she was talking about an old friend. Miguel didn't answer. He just listened. Until one afternoon, she grabbed his hand and said, "I talked to God about you. He's not mad that you don't believe. He just wants you to come back." Miguel froze. The wind picked up, and something inside him cracked, like an old wall finally giving in. "Why do you come here every day, even if you don't go inside?" Sofia's question caught Miguel off guard. They were sitting on the same bench, She was focused on her drawing, and he was just watching the endless flow of people coming in and out of the hospital. "My wife is in room 407, he said quietly. "The doctors say, well, they say she may not have much time left." Sofia paused, her crayon hovering above the paper. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at him with that calm, unsettling yet comforting gaze of hers. "Is she pretty?" she asked. Miguel smiled, for the first time in what felt like forever. She always was. But it wasn't just that. She had the kind of beauty you don't notice right away. It was in the way she listened, in her quiet, in the way she cared. Sofia rested her chin on her hands. "How did you two meet?" Miguel let out a breath, remembering. "At the butcher shop. I was picking up meat for my father. She was in line, wearing an apron stained with paint. She was an art teacher. I complained about the wait. She called me grumpy. The next day, I left a note on her windshield. 'Want to have dinner with a polite grump?' Sofia giggled. And she said yes. She did, and she never stopped surprising me after that." His voice lowered, softer now. "Helena, she was the kind of person who noticed what others ignored. She talked to her plants like she could hear them talk back. She baked cakes for neighbors going through hard times. She stayed up late finishing letters she never sent." Sofia listened closely, eyes locked on his. "You talk about her like she's still here." Miguel nodded. "Because in some way, she is." Sofia's voice dropped to a gentle whisper. "When my mom cries, I tell her what I'll do once I get better. I say we're going to plant a garden on the balcony. We'll give each flower a name." Miguel looked at her. Something trembled deep in his chest. For the first time in years, he wanted to believe in something again. "Do you have kids?" The question came as Sofia was coloring in a star. Miguel hesitated. The air around him thickened. "I had 2. Twins," he said, eyes fixed on the horizon. Sofia stopped and looked at him with kindness. "One of them, Clara, died in an accident when she was 7. He lowered his head. "The other is Elisa. She's alive, but it's been a long time since we spoke." "Don't you like her?" Sofia asked innocently. "It's not that. I love Elisa. I always have. I was a good father, you know." His voice cracked, but he pressed on. "I braided their hair, made up bedtime stories. I took Elisa to therapy, went to every parent meeting. But after Clara passed, it was like half of her died too. She got quiet, then cold, then distant. First in one day after she stopped at Sofia a few times, maybe." Sofia took his hand, gently but firmly. "Sometimes we run from love, thinking we're running from pain." Miguel looked at her, overwhelmed by a feeling he still couldn't name. "Do you think she still loves me?" "I do. But more than that, I think she's still waiting." Miguel closed his eyes, and in that moment, something buried deep inside began to shift. It wasn't just grief. It was a chance, a calling, maybe the beginning of a miracle. Miguel never stopped visiting the hospital. Every day, at the same hour, he stepped into room 407, took Helena's hand, and stayed. He didn't say much, just remained by her side. There was something sacred in that shared silence, something louder than words. Sometimes he read her favorite book in a low voice. Other times, he simply told her how the garden at home was doing. He always mentioned Sofia. "You should have heard what that little girl told me today. I'm starting to think she's got a direct line to heaven." Then he'd pause. "Helena, if you're still there, can you still hear me?" The monitor kept its slow, steady rhythm, and Miguel believed she could hear him. That belief was enough. With Sofia, the days became small rituals. They would draw, talk, share quiet moments. Miguel found himself speaking more about his daughter's childhood, about the letters Helena used to write to Elisa but never sent, about the quiet Christmases that followed. "She looks so much like you," he told her once. "When Helena taught them how to bake, Clara was the one who kept everything neat. Elisa, she was the curious one, always mixing things, always trying something new." Sofia giggled and drew a little oven with 3 hearts inside. "You should send her a picture," she said, "just to show her you're still here." Miguel smiled, unsure of what to say. Maybe it's time, he whispered. That night, he returned to the hospital like always. But when he entered the room, something had changed. Elena looked more peaceful, her breathing lighter. He held her hand a little tighter. Love, today I wrote to Elisa. The tear came before he could finish the sentence. I don't know if she'll reply, but I wrote it the way you would have. Simple. No pressure, just love. Miguel closed his eyes and let the silence fill him again. He didn't need an answer. Not anymore. Just her presence. Helena didn't speak, but the heart monitor ticked up. Just slightly, barely noticeable. But Miguel saw it. And for the first time in years, he believed something bigger might be at work. It was a grey Tuesday. Light rain fell from the sky, not enough to flood, just enough to darken everything. Miguel had just left Helena's room. He'd stayed longer than usual. Something in the air felt different. She was still in a way that frightened him. The nurse looked at him gently and said, "She's slipping away, Mr. Miguel. You should prepare yourself." He nodded silently and left the room. But that day, Sofia wasn't at the bench. Miguel looked for her everywhere, anxiety growing. He walked to the front desk. Her mother stood there, eyes red, breathing uneven. She got worse during the night, she said. Fever, high. The doctors said... Her voice broke. She's in the ICU now. Her kidneys started to fail. The chemo, it didn't work. Miguel froze. It was like hearing a death sentence all over again. Can I see her? I think so. But be ready. She's very weak. The sight of her broke him. Sofia, so full of life, now small and fragile, tangled in wires and tubes. But when he stepped into the room, her eyes opened. "Hi," she said, her voice barely a breath. "Hey, sweetheart." "I'm here," Miguel replied, moving closer. "Did you send the letter to your daughter?" He nodded, eyes wet. "Yes, I sent it yesterday." Sofia smiled. "Then I can rest." "Don't say that," Miguel begged, voice breaking. "I'm tired, Miguel, but happy. Because I did what I came to do." She touched his chest with her fingers. "You still have work to do. God said so." Miguel shut his eyes, struggling to breathe. "Don't leave me too, Sofia, please." She smiled again, weak but whole. "Trust." Then she closed her eyes. The monitor screamed. The doctors ran in. Miguel was pulled from the room. At that same moment, his phone rang. An unknown number. He answered. A trembling voice came through the line. "Dad?" It was Elisa. "Dad, it's me." Elisa's voice was soft but clear, like a whisper from the past finally reaching him. Miguel froze. It took him several seconds just to breathe. "Elisa, I got your message, I read it, and I couldn't stop crying." Miguel leaned against the cold hospital wall. Tears streamed silently down his face. I thought you didn't want to hear from me anymore." "I did, Dad. I always did. But looking at you, it felt like looking at Clara, and I hated myself for surviving." The silence between them stretched across 4 heartbeats. "You were never to blame, Elisa. Never. God took her, and I was a coward for not telling you sooner." On the other end, a quiet sob. "Is Mom still alive?" "She is, but the doctors think it might be tonight. I'm 2 hours away. I'm coming now." Miguel looked toward the sky and whispered without meaning to, "If there's still a miracle left, let it be this one." He went back to Helena's room, sat beside her and began to sing, softly, off-key, the song they used to hum when the girls were little. "If one day I can't speak, look into my eyes and hear what's left unsaid." The machines continued their slow rhythm. He took her hand in both of his. "You taught me to love, even when everything was bleeding, and now you're the one who needs me to stay." The nurse stepped in quietly. "The girl, Sofia, she's responding, breathing on her own. We don't know how, but it just happened, minutes ago." Miguel looked at Helena. A single tear slid from her closed eyes, slow, silent. "But there, you heard everything, didn't you?" he whispered. And then, at the door, Elisa appeared. She stepped inside and walked straight to the bed, laying her head gently on her father's shoulder. "I'm here, Mom." And in that moment, at the fragile crossroad between life, death, and love, something unexplainable happened. The heart monitor, which had been low and steady, began to climb. Beat by beat, Helena opened her eyes. She didn't speak at first, just locked eyes with Miguel, like someone waking from a dream they didn't want to leave. The monitor held steady. The doctors, stunned, whispered among themselves. She still needed care, but something had changed. "Can you hear me?" Miguel asked gently, as if seeking permission to hope. Helena blinked slowly. Then her fingers gave the smallest squeeze. That's when Elisa broke into tears. "Mom, it's me, Elisa." Helena turned toward her, eyes now shining. "My baby," she whispered. The voice was faint but alive. Then, suddenly at the doorway, a small shadow appeared. Sofia. Her mother rushed to stop her, panicked. "Honey, you can't be out of bed yet. You're still recovering." But Sofia looked straight ahead and answered with a soft conviction far beyond her age. "I need to see the lady with her eyes closed, right now." Miguel looked at the doctors. "Let her in. She has something to do." Sofia walked in, wearing pink slippers and holding a folded envelope. She stepped to Helena's bedside and looked her in the eyes. "I came to tell you, God hasn't given up on you." Helena tried to smile but was too weak. Sofia held her hand, calm and steady, like she was carrying something sacred. "This is my last drawing here," she said, handing over the envelope. Helena opened it slowly. Inside was a picture of a family of 4 standing in a field of flowers. Above them, a white dove in the sky, and in the corner, written in crooked letters, "The love God plants, not even time can erase." The heart monitor jumped. Helena's tears fell, soundless. Elisa held one of her hands. Miguel held the other, crying, but not out of fear. He was witnessing something holy. Sofia closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. "Jesus, thank you for giving her back. Now please finish what you started." And then Helena took a deep breath. The first deep breath since she'd fallen ill. Air returned to her lungs, color returned to her skin, and her soul returned home. Sofia walked out of the room without another word. At the door, she turned to Miguel and smiled. "She's going to stay." And then she disappeared down the hallway, like someone who already knew the ending. Helena stayed in the hospital for weeks, but she was no longer the woman fading quietly in a cold room. She was waking up, slowly, gently, as if God himself were breathing life back into her, one heartbeat at a time. Elisa never left her side. She read to her, combed her hair, played her mother's favorite songs on her phone. Sometimes they didn't say anything, just held hands and let the years of silence begin to melt. Miguel watched them both, grateful, humbled, changed. Every afternoon he would walk down to the pediatric wing. Sofia's room had butterflies on the window and a drawing of a pink oven taped to the wall. She looked stronger each day, the tubes fewer, the color returning to her cheeks. "I told you," she said one morning while coloring, "God doesn't give up easy." Miguel sat beside her, his voice warm. "You saved me, Sofia." She looked up, serious. "I just reminded you who you are." And she had. Weeks later, Helena was discharged. The doctors called her case unusual. Some used words like unexplainable. Miguel didn't argue. He knew what had happened. He had seen it. In a child's eyes, in a whispered prayer, in a moment where time stopped and something sacred stepped in. That spring, the garden in front of their house bloomed again. Helena planted new flowers with Elisa on one side and Miguel on the other. They laughed while digging in the dirt. Helena's hands were still weak, but her spirit strong as ever. Sofia came to visit once she was well enough. She wore a yellow dress and carried her sketchbook. "This one's for you," she said, handing Miguel a new drawing. It was a porch, 2 rocking chairs, and 4 hands held tight in the middle, each one different, but all connected. And at the bottom, in her uneven handwriting, "What love restores, no sorrow can undo." Helena framed the drawing and hung it in the hallway. From that day on, room 407 wasn't just a number. It was a sacred place where heaven had once whispered a miracle. And for the rest of their lives, every time Miguel sat on that porch, watching the sun dip low behind the trees, hearing Helena's soft laugh, and Elisa's voice reading out loud. He remembered the moment he almost gave up, and the little girl who reminded him that life still had more to give.